But what didn't become clear was literally how to recognize when I was recognizing. So what were the signs that I could look for that I was actually really starting to live from this place? Because they might not be what you think. And as crazy as it sounds, somebody had to tell me in hindsight, I hadn't noticed that I wasn't suffering anymore. And I hadn't noticed that I was living in a very different way than I was when I was seeking. So I thought it might be useful to kind of put some attention on this, because it came up again last night, as I said, and several times this week. Like, how would you actually know when your awakening is succeeding? What would that look like? Because if we don't know what to look for, then we might go right on past it. And perhaps at least 60%, maybe 70% of the time I spend talking to people when answering questions and taking them through things is actually spent trying to get them to see how far they've already come. Because this seeking mechanism, this forward movement of egoic, the someone that we take ourselves to be, the separate being, the person, the egoic sense of self, it's always looking towards some future moment and looking anywhere but at how we are right now in this moment. And because for most of us, awakening happens so very gradually, incrementally, tiny bit each day, but over 365 days, or even less than that, quite some profound change. But just as we don't notice how our body's growing so much, or our minds changing so much as we educate ourselves in the world and other things, we might not also notice how deep our awakening has actually gone. What would that actually look like? And, looking at that and knowing what to look for. For me, the willingness to actually stop and see if I could have already been much further down the path of living this than I realized took a very long time to come. I was so sure that I wasn't where I needed to be. Even when people were pointing this out to me, Helen, you're actually very different than you used to be. My family and everyone else, I was still moving in this direction towards some future moment. Actually, one of the most challenging things was to put the brakes on that and switch that willingness to keep moving forward to a willingness to look and see, could it actually already be unfolding? And I'm aware there might be a lot of resistance to hearing this message, because, I would have been the same. Of course, I'll know when I'm there. And I'm certain right now that I'm not there. That's what our mind is 100% convinced of most of the time. So let's take some practical examples, and hopefully this will become clearer. If we look at spiritual practice itself, let's take meditation as an example, or self-inquiry, or any spiritual practice at all. We could be listening to bhajans, we could be chanting some mantra, we could be praying, we could be contemplating, we could be attending an event like this, attending sanghas, meetups in between. But one sure sign that awakening is deepening and progressing is why we're doing those practices. So I'm sitting down to meditate each day. First, and I'm just going to use my own example because that's all I've got really. First, when I started meditating, it was to wake up, to become enlightened, to be special, to be somebody, which is kind of funny now looking back, to be liked, to be approved of, to be loved, to feel safer. On and on it went. And then gradually, the reason for sitting in meditation, and when I'm saying meditation, you could substitute anything, any practice I was doing, reading books, whatever. The reason began to change, and it was so subtly. There was still, for quite some time, this someone that wanted to be special and wanted to be the most enlightened being that had ever walked this planet. It was going to be the most enlightened person of all. Before I understood, obviously, that, you know, it's not a person that wakes up, it's the awakening that awakens. But subtly creeping in was this other motive, which was to meditate because I could reach some really nice states. So when I got quite good at meditation, I would start to feel a lot more peace and sometimes bliss. And it wouldn't last outside of meditation at that point, but it just felt so nice. So just give myself a half an hour break, 20 minutes, whatever, from the seeking itself. Still, this motivation to be someone special was there. And then an even more subtle reason was because I'm going to meditate because it feels like the right thing to do. It's what my body seems to want to do, to just sit. And also because it felt good, and also to be special. And then even later than that, to meditate because it's what seemed to be already happening. I found myself my body just sitting down. This is apparently what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Or there's some recognition of awareness, being aware of awareness happening spontaneously. And also because it felt good, and also to be special. And then even later still, this wanting to be special began to drop off. But these other three motives were still there. I wasn't managing this process. I didn't even know this was going on. The change in reason why I was doing the practice. And then eventually not feeling like I was even choosing. And I was also choosing. So choosing and not choosing, both feelings going on at the same time. If I'm supposed to meditate, I will. If I'm not, I won't. And also meditating because it feels really nice. It's getting quite profound in my meditations. So this was going on over a couple of years, and startlingly, I looked one day and actually, I was actually in the middle of just sitting, just found myself sitting. And I realized there was no other reason for doing that other than it just felt good. It just felt good to sit in meditation. It was quite shocking that somewhere along the way, this someone that was trying to become something special so that she could be liked and loved and feel safe and all of that had fallen away. And that was really shocking. I was so certain that I would know when that happened. The same activity going on, but for a profoundly different reason. And organically, that had just fallen away along the way. And it was so very gradual. And I only noticed it one day when I decided that I wasn't going to meditate because I couldn't be bothered, didn't want to, just had so much resistance. And something within me didn't beat myself up over that. So the other side of this is when something comes up like this, some emotion arises, some old trigger happens inside. First reason for me as a seeker, obviously I'm not enlightened enough. This would not be happening if I was awakened. And then the second reason that gradually crept in, well, it's coming up so that I can look at it deeper. And then the next time a trigger arose, there was this embracing of it more. And then the next time it's just coming up so that I can transmute this energy, but also because I'm not awakened enough. And gradually, again, over a couple of years, it got to the stage where there's just this energy arising because it needs to arise apparently, and I'm going to just either inquire into it, or I might ask a contemplative question, or I might do nothing at all with it. I might just feel it, and I've got no idea which one of those it's going to be. And after even more time, I looked in that sense that this was coming up because of doing something wrong and not being awakened enough had fallen away again. Couldn't tell you when that happened. It was just absolutely shocking to me that the thing that I'd wanted for so long that my whole life had been focused on. All of my time and energy and attention that I had spare went towards trying to get to, that I wouldn't have noticed that it had already happened. It's not a happening, but it already unfolded. And I was actually living in a place where something arose, a mistake was made, and I forgive myself immediately. An emotion arose, some old pattern. I said something I shouldn't have. There was nothing within me that could hold on to that. It was seen, it was looked at, it was whatever I could get out of it was getting learned from it, gotten out of it, and it was dropped. And that was quite extraordinary to me, that I could be living like that, because it happened so in these tiny, tiny increments every single day. So I'm going to invite you to look at your life right now. Why are you in this satsang right now? What reasons are there? And there might be someone who's trying to get something from it, get somewhere and be awakened. There might be another reason that it just feels nice to get together with like-minded beings. There might also be a deeper recognition that I just feel more complete and still and full when I join in with something like this. And then it might also be this other reason that you just found yourself here. Maybe you didn't even intend to be here today, but somehow the body showed up anyway. So can you recognize in that this varying, changing, very subtly perhaps, just like a child grows a little bit bigger each day and they won't realize until you stand them up against the wall and go, look, this is where you were and now you're here. Could you be in a very different place than where you think? Would you even notice? Would you know how to notice? Because if we can't recognize when we are living as what we're so desperately trying to move towards, what's the point in all of this? It didn't really occur to me that the seeking mechanism might continue after awakening, actually, just running on by itself on autopilot. And if my attention's on that, it might continue forever. I might not notice what's actually happening here. And there were a few moments where somebody pulled out in front of me in the car and, put the brakes on, and it was just close to call for a second whether I was going to be able to stop in time or whether I'd hit them. This is years ago. But there was this absence of fear. There was just this, I'm either going to hit them or I'm not, in this split second. And in that moment, there was a recognition, wow, that's really different to how I would have felt afterwards. I would have blamed myself for, how I was driving, how I would have got angry with them, how they're driving, and there'd been a lot of fear, all of that. But because of my attention was still on this forward-seeking mechanism, that experience is very quickly forgotten, and I went back to assuming that I'm not there. And I'm saying all of this because pretty much everyone I meet is a lot further along than they let themselves recognize. The fact that you turn up to satsang when you could be doing so many other things, whether you're watching this later on YouTube or here and live on this session, you've made this time to be here and hear this message. And quite a lot of human beings wouldn't even value this as something worthwhile doing. Again, fault of theirs, no blame, just they're not ready for consciously being in satsang yet. So last time you sat to meditate or attended a satsang or dealt with some intense emotion, did you handle it differently? If you look back 2 years ago, can you see how you would have handled it then? Your reason? What's your motivation for being here in this Zoom session right now? Is it different than it was? Are there more motivations present than they were initially? Is there something ever so subtly changing that we might have to really sort of put some willingness into to recognize. Because as we start to recognize that I am actually living in a different way than I would have been before, and that begins to speed up and accumulate. Only when we're willing to see that. It's much easier to the momentum to of the habit to keep on assuming that we're not where we need to be yet and keep chasing some future experience. It's very, very rare, extraordinarily rare. And I don't think we'd really want it anyway, that awakening happens as some big bang explosion where all my karmic patterns shatter in one go. I mean, we think we want that, but in actuality, if we've got to get up for work the next morning and we're just sitting there so blissed out, we don't know where our body is that really going to work? Maybe awakening is how it's unfolding is shifting for our generation of seekers so that we can still function and do what we need to do in the world to take care of what we need to take care of and who we need to take care of, and still pursue this thing that we want more than anything. So, are you willing to see where you're already at? And it doesn't mean you're going to stop, you're going to let go of the unfolding. That's just going to go on more and more effortlessly on its own. Still, even today for me, there's deepening going on, seeing things clearer that need to be seen and all of that. But the reason that that's happening is totally different than it was. And it's a part of self-love, this that we're talking about, isn't it? Am I willing to actually recognize where I'm already at or could be at? Am I willing to be wrong about how far I've got in this? Not that it's a journey, but how much I'm actually already allowing the truth to flow through and as me. Would somebody meeting me for the first time have the same opinion about me as I do? Would they say I'm much more peaceful, seem to be quite chilled out, more relaxed? Really starting to show the signs of a full realization, whatever that is. Where if I blame myself for something, it's okay. I'd rather not do it, but there's no blame about the blame. It's just okay, that happened, and there's an acceptance. Or if I do blame myself, it's dropped in 10 minutes instead of 10 hours. And it's always good really to have a Sangha around you for this, because they'll point out to you just how different you are. Sangha just meaning, well, the root of the word is similar to Satsang, to sit down together in the truth, near the truth, with the truth, as the truth. So just inviting you to be willing to see what's actually happening for you, rather than to keep this allegiance with this idea that you're not there yet. Letting go of dangling a carrot in front of you is not going to stop this unfolding. In fact, it's going to speed it up. This awakening is not driven really by the separate seeker who wants to wake up. It's driven by the self that's recognizing itself. So we don't need that carrot anymore, perhaps. And we certainly don't need a stick. Maybe we're way past that and we haven't noticed. And I know this may sound really bizarre when all of our efforts and focus are on how to make sure we get there, that somebody along the way would stop saying, just slow down a minute and check where you're at. You might have reached your destination and kept on running right past it. Have you ever done that with your sat nav, where you forget to turn it off because perhaps you're looking for a particular house number and you go further down the road and the GPS, the sat nav, saying, turn around where possible. Here is this thing, or make a U-turn, whichever one it says. Here is this thing right here in spiritual unfolding. Are we willing to actually turn around and look at how we're already living, noticing? Whichever way we come to do that. For me, journaling has always helped. It's really, and if it's not your thing, that's fine. But, find some way. If I go pick up a journal that I was writing 2 years ago, and it's like, wow, this is a different person. It's like a different lifetime. And you can really see the difference in those 2 years, or even 2 weeks ago. If you flick back 2 weeks ago, what you were struggling with and what's come out of that since. When I look back at 2 years ago, 10 years ago, there's this shifting from this is where I want to get to. All my writing was about years and years ago, where I want to get to where I am not already. And then the softening now of this is what's unfolding for me right now. And I'm saying this in as many different ways as I can to try to find some way, some chink in the armor of the seeking mechanism, or our belief, our allegiance with this seeking mechanism. Because it might just run on forever, left unchecked.